Sophie's birthday. When I was in 5th grade, something really weird happened. We had a classmate who moved to a different town in school at the beginning of the school year. Where I'm from, this is not common, so we all missed her and wondered how she was doing. Her name was Sophie. Anyways, I remember it was a Friday in January. It was cold, and as we were getting out of school, there was this lady standing outside a blue SUV, handing out birthday card invitations. "Are you in 5th grade? Come to Sophie's B-Day. You know Sophie, I'm Sophie's mom. Come to her birthday party, jump in." I peeked inside the SUV, and it's empty with a few balloons. No Sophie in sight, just a guy on the driver's seat. Anyways, something seemed fishy, so my friend and I went inside to get our teacher, and we told her about it. As this woman sees us coming out with an adult, she straight up jumped into the SUV and drove off. I don't know what happened. I don't think cops were called, but they did reach Sophie's family. Not only they lived in a different state, but it wasn't even her birthday. Sophie's mom. Let's not meet again. Machete Man. Sorry in advance for such a long post. I just wanted to get as much detail as I could. Also, I should mention I am female, and at the time I was 21 years old. About 2 years ago, my husband, 18-month-old son, and I were visiting my parents in Connecticut. My grandparents were also visiting, and we were all staying in one house. Around midnight, everyone was asleep beside me and my grandmother. We decided to watch a movie in the living room, since we were both insomniacs. She went upstairs to get the movie, and I was sitting on a couch that is pushed up against the window. It's very dark, with only the TV being on. A loud tap, tap, tap on the window behind me makes me jump. I see it. It is 2 police officers and get a little nervous. When I go to the door, they speak to me very quietly, almost whispering for me to step outside. I do. "Are you the girl that made the distress call?" I tell them no, and they must have the wrong house. The first officer then says, "We received a call from someone saying that there was a naked man with a machete trying to break into the house. This house." I am in a complete shock at this point, and kind of laugh nervously, which the second officer didn't like. He pretty much pushed past me and went inside, while saying he needs to look around inside. I didn't interfere. They looked around downstairs, and I ran upstairs to tell my family what was going on. I look outside and see there are an additional 4 cop cars in the driveway now. As I'm heading back downstairs, the second officer is running upstairs with his gun drawn and bursts through the second floor door to the garden. I see the naked man holding the machete just standing there. He starts to run, but he gave in rather quickly and went down to his knees and put his hands on the back of his head. The policeman told me that he saw the man from downstairs just staring through the door at me with a knife at his neck. The naked man went on to tell the cops he was cutting the grass to feed his goat, showing he's psycho, since it was January and there was snow on the ground. Anyways, someone from the McDonald's parking lot saw the guy and made the call, and I'm pretty damn sure saved our lives. I still have nightmares of that creepy night. I ran the gauntlet at bar close and escaped a creeper. Former lurker first post blah blah blah. I'm a girl and was 22 years old at the time. The story takes place in early January in Madison, Wisconsin. Madison is notorious for its drinking culture, boasting the famous kilometer-long State Street, basically one long uninterrupted series of bars. It links the university library to the state capitol. I parked my car at the end near the library and met up with some friends. We ended up at this bar right next to the Capitol, where we ran into many old high school classmates. My friends decided to leave earlier, but a former old friend asked me if I could give him and his older brother a ride back. I agreed. So I waited for him to finish his drinks so we could leave. I waited and waited. I waited for about 20 minutes. About 10 minutes to bar close, 2 a.m., He tells me he's getting a ride from someone else instead. I'm pissed, but didn't show it and walk off. Now, I have to make it back to my car, while all the drunks exit the bar hollering at any girls they see. There's an icy wasteland between me and my car, so I bundle up and start walking briskly down State Street. Catcalls, jeering, crude propositions. I'm practically jogging at this point. Suddenly, this guy catches up to me and starts trying to start a conversation mid-jog. He asks me my name, where I live, what I'm doing now, and all manner of inappropriate questions. I get super weird vibes and try to shake him, but he follows me until nearly the end. I realized that the very last bar is coming before I have to round a corner to get to my car, where we would have been alone. I made a ballsy decision. I made eye contact with a pair of built yet non-creepy looking guys and went right up to them and threw my arms around him, exclaiming, "Oh my God, Andy, I haven't seen you in forever. How have you been?" The guy was so confused at first, but mid-hug I whispered, "Help me," in his ear. So he played along, and after about a minute of ad hoc dialogue, the creeper retreated. Once he was gone, I thanked the guys, said goodnight, and made it back to my car. If I hadn't had the courage to approach two random guys and ask for help, I don't know how the night would have ended. Someone chased us as we were driving. In January of this year, my friend's mom took us and another friend to go look for prom dresses. We were out till about 8 p.m., so it was already pitch black outside when we left. I was going to get dropped off first, since I still had homework to do. To get to my house, you turn off a busy road onto a side street, and then onto another side street. On the first side street, we passed someone walking on the sidewalk, which was a little strange considering it was dark outside, but whatever. Didn't think much of it. Until I went to get out of the car. My friend's parents never pull into the driveway, because it's tricky to get into my driveway. I'm sitting on the right side of the car, and my house is on the left side, so I would have to walk around the car and cross the street. Anyways, I'm about to get out of the car when my friend's mom tells me to close the door. The guy we passed earlier was now walking towards the car right in the middle of the street. Mom told me to stay in the car because the guy was holding something in his right hand and it resembled a gun. Mom put the car in drive and floored it up the street, and the guy started running after us. We turned on another side street, and he followed us again. He only stopped when we went on the main road, but even then, it seemed like he was going to follow us still. We went and dropped off the other friend first, and when we got back to my house, there was nobody on the street. When I told my parents about it, my dad pointed out that there was someone going around our neighborhood robbing cars, which is a possible explanation, but why? Why would a car thief have a gun? Why would he need a gun? And why would he chase after a moving car? So yeah, possibly gun-wielding creeper guy. Let's not meet again. I don't want to know what your intentions were. Almost abducted, saved by GIGANT. This occurred when I was 18 years old and backpacking my way throughout the world. I always looked a few years younger than my actual age and often had problems getting into places. I often found myself hissing, "No, really, I am adult," to people who refused to believe the numbers stated on my ID card. I arrived in West Australia in January, in a little town that looked nothing like the brightly colored postcard world that I left behind in Sydney. I had rented a car and was getting used to the Aussie way of driving and didn't pay attention to the fact that I was running out of fuel. So naturally, the car suddenly gave up with a whimper and came to a halt. I wasn't that worried, since I had a spare tank in the trunk, as advised when driving the vast distances I intended to. I had problems getting the lid off though. No matter how hard I pulled it, it didn't give. So I start walking back to the little cluster of shops I had spotted earlier. I was greeted by a man on an ATV-ish thing sitting outside a shop. He nodded in the direction of road and said, "Problem with the car, missy?" I must have looked puzzled, because he smiled and said, "No one comes walking in here from that direction. There's nothing out there." I explained my situation, and he listened, sympathetically. "Did you rent the car from Creepy Fred?" "No wonder it gave up on ya. That bloke can't be trusted, you see." He introduced himself as Charlie, and quickly got the lid off the spare tank for me. "Want to ride back to the car? It's awfully warm to walk in the middle of the day. No ozone layer here, you see." I felt a bit stupid hesitating. He seemed like a nice guy, and he was right. The sun was terrible. My shoulders already burnt despite the sun protection. He must have sensed my hesitations, because he put a hand on my shoulder and smiled. "I'm not the boogeyman, I promise you. I don't want anyone walking in this weather. I would have offered you a ride if you were a 40-year-old bloke, too. Here, you take the helmet. My head isn't worth protecting anyways." So, I got up on the back of his ATV, the spare petrol tank in front of me, and a somewhat uneasy feeling in my stomach. "Just tap my shoulder if you want me to slow down, alright?" He drove down the short distance to my car, but he didn't slow down. I tapped his shoulder, I tapped again. He drove straight past it. In the rearview mirror, I could see him grin as he speeded up. I couldn't jump. It was too high speed, and it would have killed me, and I have no idea where he was taking me. But I felt certain his intentions were evil. This continued for at least 30 terrifying minutes, until I could see a little rest stop, clearly made for people to stop and enjoy the view. As we approached the rest stop, I saw my chance to grab hold of his throat with both hands, squeezing as hard as I could. I felt him struggle to keep the vehicle on the road while fighting for air, and as we came up alongside the rest stop, he had no choice but to stop. I threw myself off, tossing the helmet and screaming loudly enough to wake the dead. There was a truck there, but no person in view. However, only a moment later, the door to the loo opened, and a terrifying-looking man with a beard and proportions like a grizzly demanded to know what the hell was happening. I pointed to my abductor and cried that he was trying to kidnap me, and the grizzly man tried to grab hold of the abductor, but wasn't fast enough. Soon, he was gone. The grizzly man turned out to be really nice, and he phoned the police for me and waited with me until they got there. Since that day, I don't judge by appearances. Charlie was a nice-looking bloke, charming smile, and it seemed good intentions. Grizzly man George looked like he had been awakened from his ancient lair, but was actually a really good guy. I later made my way back home, with many stories to tell and lots of memories. But this one is by far the creepiest. Trying to help a lost girl. Once a few years ago, during winter in college, I was studying for a math final that I was taking the following day at 7 in the morning. I'm female, and my roommate, also female, left me home alone to go to the library and study for her own finals. It was dark and pretty late when I realized I didn't have my calendar. I called and texted my roommate to no avail, and figured I'd do without until she got home. As I continued, I hear a knock on the door, figuring it is my roommate who forgot her key. I open it up without looking through the window. Outside was a girl around my age, wearing sweatpants and slipper-type shoes. Her bottom half was quite soaked, since it was January outside, and there was quite a bit of snow on the ground. The girl immediately tells me she is lost, and asks if she could use my phone. Sure, no problem, this is a college town. People frequently get lost, and maybe her phone died. So I let her inside, offer her some water, and give her my phone. She takes it and immediately starts making phone calls. As she does so, she's walking around my living room making observations, noting the bowl that was on the table, saying she smokes too. After about 10 minutes, it becomes painfully obvious nobody is answering. I tell her I could figure out where she needs to go, and she could follow me in my car. She doesn't have a car. It turns out wherever she came from, she walked through the frigid air and snow. I asked her how long she'd been walking, and she says, for about 2 hours now. At this point, she has had my phone for about 20 minutes or so. She asked to use my laptop so she can get on Facebook and contact her boyfriend. Through general conversation, I find out that her boyfriend is about 25 years old, and he too is unresponsive. I make every attempt I can to help her while also getting her out of my house, since things aren't adding up, and I am by myself with her, my phone being held hostage. All of a sudden, my roommate comes through the door, looking surprised that a stranger is sitting in our living room. She says she came because she tried calling me a bunch of times about that calculator thing. We knew something was wrong because I wasn't answering. Homegirl is still sitting there playing with my phone, and we start asking her more questions. Where did she come from? Finally, she tells us she left rehab after trying to stab a nurse and has been walking for a long time. I ask her, rehab for what? And she says, "They say heroin, but I don't do heroin, okay?" Eventually, this girl gets so comfortable in our house that my roommate calls some friends who swing by because we didn't know how to gracefully make this girl leave. We basically end up all piling in a car, driving to the police station and letting them deal with her. When we finally get home, we Google surrounding rehabs and actually find the one she escaped from. They verify this attempted stabbing incident and let us know that the cops contacted the facility and she was on her way. This is probably not the scariest story in the world, but I still get shit for it to this day. It definitely helps me be less naive. Late night encounter in the boonies. Despite my love of all things creepy, I'm a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural. Before I get downvoted to hell, I would like to preface this by saying I'm not trying to emphasize that I believe that there is a logical explanation for everything. The time I saw a black figure floating above me for about 5 minutes, sleep paralysis. That time I saw a pair of eyes reflecting some passing headlights in the cornfield across my house, a deer. But here is one that I have yet to find an explanation for. Maybe you, my lovely Let's Not Meet friend, can help out. To give you some backstory, I'm from a little farm town that nobody's ever heard of. The road I grew up on was named after the great-great-great-grandfather of our church secretary's husband. Yeah, that kind of podunk town. It was the late 90s, and I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. My father worked third shift and was never home after 9:30 at night, and it was sometime in late winter, probably January or February. At the time, I had a cat named Sassy. To answer your question, no, she doesn't die in the story, and yes, I named her after the cat in the movie Homeward Bound. How original do you expect a 3-year-old to be? Sassy was the runt of her litter and incredibly docile. She never bit, never scratched, and never hissed. At least, not until this particular night. Our routine started out normal. I'd gone to bed and was starting to drift off until Sassy decided to take her usual residence on my chest. I began absent-mindedly petting her as I worked on dozing off again, when all of a sudden she stood up and hissed. I bolted upright, instinctively knowing something was wrong. I crept out into the hall just in time to hear a knocking on the door. As I came around the corner into the living room, I saw my mother frozen in shock, and her hand still on the doorknob. There were 2 figures standing outside wearing what I would come to know as the Scream costumes. Time seemed to stand still, but the sound of my weight on the floorboard snapped my mother out of her trance. She slammed the door in their masked faces and locked it all in one swift motion. She dashed for the phone and herded me into the hallway, which was the darkest area of our house and place where they would most likely be unable to see us if they were planning something. A police officer came very quickly and took my mother's statement and worked on calming her down. He then patrolled the neighborhood for at least the next hour, while my mother called all the neighbors to warn them and see if they'd had any similar experiences. Unfortunately, the officer never did find anyone lurking around our house or the woods nearby, nor did our neighbors have any similar experiences. I found this particularly creepy for 2 reasons. Normally, I would assume that it was just a couple of asshat teenagers playing a prank, but looking back, they stood well over the height of my 5'6" mother, and I suspect that they were adults, judging by their build. Furthermore, why us? Why our house? There are dozens of similarly laid out houses. The only thing I can think of is that if they observed us, they would know we were the only people on the block without a man at home at night. If they were looking to perpetrate some sort of crime, a mother and her young daughter would certainly be the easiest to overpower. It still gives me the shivers thinking about it, and my mother often refuses to speak about it when I bring it up. Sassy never did hiss again. May she rest in peace. I've heard numerous stories about animals sensing tsunamis and other natural disasters, but not this type of thing. I still question what prompted her to hiss so violently, and what might have happened if she hadn't. Let's not meet, let's just say, I'm glad I'll never know, and of course, to those masked creeps all that time ago, let's not meet again. He called himself Doctor. I'm a 23-year-old female from the UK. This happened when I was 17 years old, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was January the 2nd, 2012. My boyfriend and I had just parted ways for the night. I was 3 miles away from my home, and the only way towards it was down a long, dimly lit road. Houses adore on the one side, while pubs and businesses were present on the other side. It was around 7:30 p.m., and being winter time, it was extremely dark outside. My mother had warned me against walking down that road on my own, but against my better judgment, I decided to walk down that street. About 5 minutes into my walking, I could hear someone or something through the music I was listening to through my earphones. I looked behind me to see a man, wearing his hood up, had a baseball cap on, dressed in mostly dark colors, doing some kind of walk-jog type deal to catch up with me. Immediately, I panic, as I don't like strangers at the best of times, and I'm very awkward. I quickly take my earphones out and tuck them into my pocket, unsure what this man's intentions were. He catches up to me and begins walking alongside me. "Hey," he says. I don't answer. I don't even acknowledge him. "Hey, I saw you walking up there," he says. He then asks, "Hey, how are you?" Clearly not getting the hint that I want to be left alone. I reply, "Good, thanks. I'm on my way home." I pick up my pace slightly, trying to make it obvious that I do not want to talk. He asks, "What's your name?" Again, being on high alert, I give him a fake name. Charlotte. Charlotte, that's a nice name. I get this creepy vibe from him. Sneaking a quick look, I see the guy has a ton of facial scars and his eyes are practically bulging out of the sockets. "So what's your name?" I asked, feigning politeness and trying not to show my fear. "The boys call me the Doctor." I ask, "Doctor?" He replies, "That's me." Speaking of boys, would you like to come meet my friends? Panicking more now, I reply, "No, I've got to get home." I keep walking, cursing at myself inside my mind. If only I had listened to my mother. Why did I walk down this road alone? "Come with me," he said, slightly pulling on my jacket arm. "What do you mean? What for?" The fear now breaking out on my voice. He replies, "I need a favor." "What favor?" He then asked me for a blowjob, and I'm freaking out at this point. I felt numb all over, and although I had a phone on me, I could not discreetly call 999, as I didn't know if this guy had a knife or a weapon. His crazed expression would have been enough to put anyone on edge. I replied to this creep, "Listen, I don't do that kind of stuff, Doctor." He begins to get a little more persistent, saying that he hasn't had a woman in such a long time. Pulling at my jacket arm with more force than before, he attempted to nudge me towards dark, empty parking lots. I continued walking as fast as I possibly could, to which he was now telling me to slow down, and that he doesn't know anyone who walks that fast. He had to jog to keep pace. I finally reached the town, which was 2 miles from my home, but no way was I leading this guy back to my house, so I decided to go to a local supermarket, which was open 24 hours. I could have cried with happiness, being that there were people all around, but this guy was still latched onto my side, now staying deathly silent since we were in the public eye. Instead of acting like a normal person and asking for help, I panicked and decided to go to the restroom. A stupid move, I know. In hindsight, I would have immediately told someone of my predicament, but I was 17 years old at the time, and being extremely scared caused me to make that one friggin' mistake. I head into the restroom, which to me was a safe haven, until he followed me into the toilets. That's when he grabbed me by my arm. He kicked open one of the stall doors and growled, "Get in!" Through tears, I told him, "I don't do that." He again growled, "Get in!" with a more furious tone, before tugging at my arm again, and then, miraculously, one of the shop's employees had been using one of the stalls. She came out and sees Doctor, a male in a woman's toilet, and immediately tells him, "You cannot be in here. This is the woman's bathroom." He looks shocked as he looks to me, then back to the woman, and then back at me. He then tells me, "I'll be waiting for you outside, Charlotte," and quickly takes his leave, giving one last foul glance over his shoulder before the restroom door swings shut. At that moment, my legs buckle from underneath me, and I start sobbing my heart out. The employee asked me if I was okay, to which I told her about the ordeal I had endured for the past half an hour. I told her how I did not have any idea who this man was, and that he had just begun following me. She then told me to get into one of the stalls, lock it, and don't open it until it was another employee. In the 5 minutes I was in that stall, my mind raced. I never felt so vulnerable in all my life. My heart was still beating hard. My legs were like jello. I was emotionally and mentally spent. I was fully expecting the door to be kicked open by Doctor, but it never happened. Instead, the door knocked. It was an employee, informing me that the police were on their way. She then guided me out to the cafe, where they gave me a free drink to settle my nerves. I felt like a little kid again, in a world full of adults, explaining my experience again, to which the 3 staff, 2 women and 1 man, couldn't believe how brave I was. The one woman commenting on the fact that you wouldn't expect it to happen to someone as well dressed as I was. After all, I was never one of skirts or heels. I favored my baggy jeans and Converse sneakers. Before long, I felt someone grip my shoulder. It was him again. "Are you coming, Charlotte?" I didn't look at him. I didn't talk to him. I froze. I just sat there looking at the staff in desperation. That's when a very burly security guard escorted him back outside. One staff member kept me talking, while a few more were watching him on CCTV. The creep had been standing outside, waiting for me for about half an hour. After 45 minutes, the police arrived and gave me a ride home. I had to give a statement in front of my mother, who was both horrified but at the same time, very matter-of-fact serves you right type attitude. For weeks, I had to go to and from the police station to give more in-depth statements, one being recorded on a tape. Another time, I had to try and identify Doctor through pictures of sex offenders, but alas, the Doctor was never caught. I can't even imagine what could have happened to me if that woman wasn't in that stall that night, or if I didn't have the common sense to go to a brightly lit public place. One thing is for certain, I never ever walk down that road anymore, and if I'm out after dark, I always have someone with me, as I cannot make it 50 feet without feeling uneasy that someone may be following me. I also carry pepper spray at all times, even though it's classed as an offensive weapon and is illegal to carry around in the UK. I won't be making that same mistake twice. Robbed at gunpoint. I worked at a stop and rob when I was an undergrad at college. The store was located near campus and was in a decent neighborhood. A large number of my customers were students picking up snacks and beer. The hardest part of the job was enforcing no ID, no sale. I had several students get pissed at me for that. I also had my regulars from the apartments and people going to and from work. I was working a late swing shift, 5 p.m. to midnight. It was January, so it was dark by 6:30. Early in my shift, there was a steady flow of customers. By 8 p.m. though, it was slow to a trickle, and my focus was on restocking and straightening shelves. I returned to the register. A guy wearing a college sweatshirt entered the store and hung out in the alcohol aisle for a bit. I figured he might be thinking about a beer run. No, finally, he grabbed some beer, brought it up to the counter. When I asked for ID, he pulled a gun, aimed it at my face, and told me to empty the register. They say a gun barrel looks the size of a cannon when you're staring down the business end. It's a trite metaphor, but sure, it was the largest hole I'd ever seen in my entire life. My stomach churned and I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking so hard that I miskeyed the register the first time. He was yelling and getting more agitated. I finally got the register open and emptied it, and the scratched lottery tickets into a bag. I laid on the floor behind the counter as instructed. At this point, my brain flashed to all the cop shows I'd ever watched. I was convinced the next thing I would see was St. Peter greeting me. I heard the door buzzer ring. Please let that be him leaving and not a customer entering. The store was eerily quiet as I carefully inched my way to the end of the counter to find the store was empty. The guy took the beer as well. I guess it was a beer run after all. I vomited as I called 911. I didn't feel safe until the cops arrived. 4 days later, I worked the 5 to 11 shift again. What can I say? I really needed the money. Creepy robber guy, let's not meet again. Your hair is simply stunning. Is it dyed? We had just moved into our current house. We had been evicted with our 3-month-old, and it was a stressful time. I was sleep deprived and wrapped up in the new world that is motherhood. We had a few problems when we moved in with debts on the meters, and had to spend 2 days cleaning the place up because it was filthy, but the estate agents were very helpful. The guy who sorted our agreement even cleared the depths up with the energy company just to save me the hassle. So it was the first night. We had just turned the gas back on. We all wore our thickest pajamas and an extra duvet. Yeah, it was that cold sigh, England. But I snugged up next to my beautiful newborn and settled down for a night of breastfeeding. Just as I started to doze off, I heard a faint buzzing noise. Like when your phone is under the duvet and you can't place exactly where the vibrating is coming from. I felt around for my mobile under my pillow. Silent. I nudge my boyfriend. Whispers, "Yo, is your phone ringing?" "No, my phone's dead. Why?" By this point, the buzzing has stopped. I put it down to half-asleep imagination and turned over. Maybe 5 minutes passed. Again, I'm dozing off and buzz. So, now I am a little confused and extremely tired. I laid in bed listening until it stops, and attempt to forget about it. But alas, it starts up again. It's 11 p.m., the middle of January, and I'm a sleep-deprived new mom. I don't need this crap. So I scoop up my little baby, wrap us both in a blanket, and toddle on to the landing, listening for the buzzing. When it starts up, I follow it around to the airing cupboard where we keep the towels. When I open it up, it gets louder. So I found the source. Now what the hell is it? From right in the back of the cupboard, there's a light. It's a phone. I hold my sleeping beauty in one arm and reach in as delicately as possible. It's a block number calling a small pink Nokia. And against my better judgment, I answer the call. The conversation went like this. "Hi, who is this?" "Your admirer from afar." "Okay, please stop calling this phone. I'm not who you're looking for, sorry." I hang up. The phone is locked, so I can't put it on silent. So I just put it on a pile of clothes and hope they ring back the buzzing won't be audible. By this point, my little bundle is grizzling from the messing around, so I settle down to nurse praying for sleep. I notice the phone light up but ignore it. Once my son drops off, I get sick of the room being lit up, so I put him in the Moss's basket and grab the phone, march downstairs with an answer. "I don't know who you are, but I'll be turning this phone into the police station in tomorrow morning. You can call it, or I don't know, but please stop calling tonight." "Oh, you shouldn't tell strangers your schedule, pretty lady." "Okay, goodbye." "Your hair is simply stunning. Is it dyed? I've never seen such a rich shade of red, like a classic English rose, with your porcelain skin and your bountiful boss." "Right? You need to stop, you fucking creep." "Your eyes are like oceans of Nutella." "What?" "And your smile lights up my world." Commence heavy breathing. At this point, I'm double checking all the locks and the windows, and my boyfriend is tiptoeing down the stairs asking what the heck I'm doing. The guy was whispering all sorts of gross stuff like, "Baby is lucky to suckle on those titties," and "I'll rip your boyfriend's throat." My boyfriend took the phone, told the guy to drop dead and turn it off. In the morning, my boyfriend's dad took the phone to a local police station. They looked through the phone's contents, which clearly belonged to a woman, and took all the photos with males in it for me to look at. And would you believe it? There is more. That half of the photos was the estate agent with a very pretty blonde girl. Turns out this was his girlfriend's phone that had gone missing weeks ago. He had hidden it in the house while doing the rounds one day, ready to harass whoever moved in. We couldn't press charges because he didn't actually commit an offense, but I was later informed he had been sacked and his girlfriend had left him. Unfortunately, I didn't receive this information from the police or estate agents, but that's a story for another post. Just to be safe though, let's not meet.